Welcome to Falcons Drip, your go-to source for Falcons news and draft coverage. I'm Thon Ray, founder and voice of Falcons Drip.
Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to go over the day 3 of the draft where we had an excellent 4th-round pick, didn't have a 5th or 6th round, and then we had 2 7th-round picks as well. I'm joined by my co-host Kyle. Kyle, what do we got today? What's going on?
Oh, well, we're talking about the 3 picks, and we'll probably get into Justin Marshall a little bit, who we've talked about in the spaces as our projected number 5 receiver as of right now on this Falcons roster.
Perfect. Yeah, well, definitely someone to kind of keep your eye out for. So let's just jump right into pick 113, Clark Phillips III. And to me, he was an excellent pickup. I honestly I don't think you could show me one mock draft that had Atlanta taking him in the 4th round. I think every single mock draft you saw showed him as at one point, I know he was a 1st round projection and then maybe didn't have as good of a combine as you would have liked. And he dropped for a lot of people into the 2nd round. I don't think I ever saw anyone showing him getting taken outside of the 2nd. And if they did, there was no way it was outside of the 3rd round.
He was definitely 2nd and 3rd at latest is what most people saw. But in any draft class, you'll see a couple guys fall that are projected 2nd, 3rd rounders or slide to day 4 just because there's so much talent at that upper crop that they have some issues that the teams are like, okay, we're going to slide them down because we think this guy's more of a solid contributor day 1 and more of a surefire pick. So
just like jumping into Phillips's positives, like he's quick, he's twitched up, he's explosive. He's pretty fluid and he's pretty much shut down everybody. I don't have the stats in front of me, but he did a number on Drake London 2 years ago, and last year, the 23rd overall pick, Jordan Addison, he shut him down too. So he is great. He's feisty, and the best part about him, and it kind of seems like this is the mold for all of the guys that Terry drafted this year. You hear Terry and Arthur talking about him. That's Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith, our general manager and head coach. You hear them talking about him, and they talk about how he's a gym rat. He's coachable. He is so confident. And they also talked about, he didn't do great at the combine, but he plays bigger. He acts bigger. He's like, even though he's 185 pounds, they talk about him being rocked up. He ran a 4.51 at the 40. And when Terry asked where people got that number, because his scouts got a lower number than that. He didn't say what it was exactly, but this is a guy definitely fell too far, and it sounds like we were great to pick him up. But just to kind of leave it at this, he's not a bulldog, but he is a dog.
100%. And I think he'll be playing nickelback, which he'll probably be competing with Mike Hughes for reps. So maybe expect to see Mike Hughes, let's say 75% of the time, and maybe he comes on and rotates in for let's say 20% of the snaps, and maybe you have another guy who gets maybe 2 or 3 snaps.
Yeah, and I think that maybe to start, right? But I really would not be shocked with his confidence, with his attitude, with his swagger that he has, and the amount of work and time he puts in, that I would not be shocked to see him be the starter before camp's over, truthfully.
100%.
Will it happen? Who knows?
Yeah, but right now, you have to project Mike Hughes as the day 1 starter because he's unproven at the NFL level. Would I love for him to start? Yes, because he's got the higher upside of the 2 guys as of right now, and I think he very well could. But as of right now, Mike Hughes is the projected starter, and I think he's a quality depth piece who rotates in a bunch for them.
So one person who, when I think of Clark Phillips, someone who I thought, like, watching him play, I always thought of was Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, which is hilarious because, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson played obviously the kind of the nickelback in the system for the Saints. And Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's a little bit bigger, but he's got that same type of attitude, right? Where maybe Chauncey Gardner's a little bit meaner, where Phillips is a little bit more confident, if that makes any sense. Like you don't have to worry about, I know Chauncey Gardner Johnson got reported like spitting on people, and he instigated multiple fights in practice with Michael Thomas. Part of that's probably because Michael Thomas is also not a brainiac, so you combo
Mhm.
it up. But I don't think you have to worry about some of those things. It's like the toned down version of Chauncey.
Okay, so like basically if you're doing like a discount version.
I don't even want to say that because because I think he could be just as good of a player in the NFL. He is
Mhm.
like I said, he's a little bit smaller. When you look at statistically, right? Um, Chauncey Gardner ran a 4.48. Phillips reportedly ran a 4.51. I mean, those are very, very close. And like I said, Terry said they got, similar numbers. Although Chauncey Gardner was about 20, 15, like 15 pounds heavier, 20 pounds heavier than Phillips. Phillips still put up more bench reps. So,
Yeah, and to see the highlight tapes of him shutting down Drake London was impressive. Because he's a fourth round cornerback. But I'll mention an offensive lineman who did that to a first round pick in Aiden Hutchinson. And that'd be Jamari Salyer, who went 195 in the previous draft to the Chargers, and he had a great first season. So I wonder if it's going to be the same way with Phillips,
mm.
a guy who showed some promise versus a really talented player. And maybe people didn't see it 100% of the time, but he starts to show it in the NFL, and people finally notice.
And I believe too, Phillips had 6 interceptions last year, if that's correct, and had multiple pick sixes throughout his career. So I mean, he has a knack for finding the football. He's everything that Atlanta talks about. He's everything that Atlanta talks about, and I said this about Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith was checked every single box of what Falcons were bringing in for defensive players. So does Phillips.
100%. I really love the pick. I I'm not 100% like dialed in on him. I don't know perfectly how he's gonna mesh, but I know from what I've seen, he's a great player, and I know there's room for him to grow. And being in Utah is a great place to be. That's a football place that's been on the rise for years and years, and they were considered by many I talked to before the season as a dark horse to make the playoffs last year, which was very
Mhm.
interesting to hear from a lot of people. So I'm really excited to get a guy from a good college football place who's coming in and has some great college football games where he's locked down some great players.
Absolutely. Can't be upset. Can't be upset about that. Like I
Mm,
said, it's one of those things where it's shocking, right? It's shocking to see him fall to the fourth round, and we totally took advantage of it.
100%. With that, do you want to move on to
Helms,
DeMarcco Helms?
I think it's Hellams. I thought,
Hellams?
yeah. Let's
I'm
let's
horrible with names.
that's okay. Yeah, let's do it. Go ahead. You can
Um,
jump on in.
well, we'll go to Helms. He ran a slower 40. He obviously was drafted 224th overall. He ran a 4.5740, but he's a hard-hitting safety. He's like an enforcer type, like a Cam Chancellor, obviously not on the Cam Chancellor level, but he's that type of player. Um, but
So
overall, he'll probably be a depth piece who rotates in early and
I
maybe
kind of
ends up on the practice squad depending on how he looks.
I think he'll end up being our fourth safety. I think
Mhm.
he adds something that our other safeties don't have a ton of because of that size, the 6'1", 203. And he led Alabama actually in tackles and finished sixth in the SEC in total tackles with 108 last year. Also had seven pass breakups and an interception. And he's a strong run defender that can play in the slot as long as you make sure you get him an appropriate matchup, right? Like you're not going to want to put him on a blazer. You're not going to want to put him on like a shifty slot receiver. Maybe a slower tight end, right? You're not going to want to put him up against your Kyle Pitts, obviously, or people all of that nature. But that's kind of what you possibly could use him for, or in a lot of goal line situations.
Yeah, I know we've been talking, whether it be on Spaces or privately, we were talking about him as like this run stopper
Mm,
or guy you bring up in the box to blitz,
mm,
similar to that Cam Chancellor vein. Obviously he needs time to develop, but that's definitely like the ceiling, for a guy of this nature. I don't know if he can get to that point, but
mm,
that's the ceiling guy that you'd like if you're drafting a guy of that caliber.
mm-hmm. Yeah, like we talked about, pretty much close to the line of scrimmage type safety. You're never going to want him in the deep third. You're never going to want him in the deep half of
Hmm.
the field. But if used appropriately, he could be a very solid and helpful player going forward. I honestly, too, he could potentially be uh, like a third safety, like a guy who, like I said, you don't want him over the top, but maybe a safety that comes in to play some linebacker in some dime situations. Maybe just like I said, a guy close to the line of scrimmage. So,
He's kind of different from Branch. Do you know how Branch, I want to mention him, how
mhm.
he could play nickelback and safety? This guy can play safety and linebacker. So it's kind of that weird, kind of opposite mix.
Hmm.
Um, but it's something I think the Falcons need more. Because he can help in that pass rush. Because I feel like he'd be great in the blitzing game and great in the run game. So
And
really excited about this pick.
his nickname is Hitman, so
Hmm.
he's there just to smash people. He's an enforcer type player, which we've kind of talked about. And if in zone coverages, I think that's great. Like the hook to curl, the flats, awesome.
Hmm.
Don't want him deep. Don't want him deep downfield. And you don't really want him in man to man coverage. It showed in the Tennessee game. They picked on him a lot, matching Hyatt, matching
Hyatt,
Hyatt up with him, and I think four of his five touchdowns against Alabama was against him. And,
100%. He's a
and
great player. But he definitely needs some more development. And we've talked about consistency being an issue for him.
yeah,
And he definitely needs to improve his man game because you can't be one dimensional. You have to be at least decent at it to where you can't get completely destroyed over the top every time.
and I,
So that'll be a thing he works on.
Yeah, and I've seen his draft grade all over the board because it depends on how much you look at what he can do versus what he can't do. Like if you're only looking at what he can do and make sure he fits in that scheme and he fits in that system, I've seen him as high ranked as high as a third round pick. I believe Keith Sanchez out of the Draft Network had him as a third rounder on his board. And they do it right over the Draft Network. So
Mhm.
but he points out all of the flaws that we've talked about. And like I said, so if you can use him appropriately, I think he'll be an asset to a defense. If not, if you want to try and put a square peg in a round hole, then he won't be.
Yeah,
So
he's definitely a guy who needs a system that fits him well to do well. He needs that right environment, which
mhm.
I think the Falcons have a great environment for young guys as of right now because they got a lot of veterans. They got a lot of guys who can teach young players like that. So I'm really excited to see how this blend of veterans and rookies can make the best best core of safeties and corners possible, which I think we take 10, um, 6 corners, 4 safeties, and hopefully he'll be one of those safeties.
Yep, I think so. I think he'll be the fourth. I think he'll be the fourth safety. But plus, like we touched on, didn't talk about a lot about his special teams role. So
I'm hoping I can put out like a 53-man projection once this roster gets kind of settled,
we should definitely
because
do
there's
that.
still some roster movement going on.
We should definitely do
Chase
that.
Bryce visiting and stuff.
We should do we'll do a podcast where we go over like you can do your projected. We'll do like
Uh-huh.
projected offense, and I'll do projected offense, and we'll do defense like the next time or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. I'm totally down for that. Um, but let's go on to our third pick. I know we've talked about this one being the biggest head scratcher. It's kind of back to the roots of like a Schaefer. One of those head scratchers where it's not the best O lineman on a team. It's kind of like the guy who was just maybe the third or fourth best offensive lineman for a team. He was a captain on South Carolina for 2 years. I haven't seen anything go too wrong where he's like this horrible offensive lineman, but he's one of those guys where I think you maybe could have gotten him as an undrafted free agent. So this was the only pick I have gripes with, but all the rest were really good.
So I didn't. This was one of the first people I'll admit that I had no idea who he was when we drafted him, and I would say I know 90% of the players, and maybe more of the players that end up getting drafted. I did not know him at all, so I had to do I between then and now. So today we're recording it Sunday night. So between Saturday and now, we had to do a lot of I had to do a lot of scouting. And Ledford came out, and there's a video of him that Atlanta posted talking about him, and it really makes me get excited. He talks about how, and this is their job, right? They're never gonna come out and say, "Oh, hey, like this is, we drafted this guy, but I don't really like him." They'll never say that. There's a reason why they drafted him. There's something that they see in him, and it's his tenacity, it's his football smarts, and his work ethic. So one thing they talked about is bringing him in, and he's going to push the other players on this line because he's going to give it his all the time. He's going to be in the gym. He's going to be working with the coaches. He's going to do everything he can. He's undersized. There's nothing, there's no other way of putting it. He's 6'1" with short arms, and he's not even 300 pounds. He has adequate quickness. Um, but he's always in the right place at the right time, and there's something to be said about that. He's because he's not very big, he's not going to possess any pop, he's not going to move a lot of people, but he makes me think of a guy who possibly, if he were to kind of work at it, maybe over the years, could be developed into a possible starter. Will that happen? I'm not sure. I think that he has the drive, he has the work ethic, and he's the type of guy, like I said about Clark Phillips. And we didn't talk about Hitman like this, but he is another player who's got some attitude and wants to win and will push himself. But
Yeah,
Gwen,
I'm honestly just not sure about him. I know he's got some traits, but he's a little bit older. He's coming out as a redshirt senior. So he's like closer to 23, has already had a lot of years to develop. So the fact
mhm.
that he hasn't developed to say he was the best offensive lineman on that South Carolina offensive line who didn't have anyone crazy where you were like, that's all SEC, crazy
Mhm.
top end SEC quality makes me think, I'm not sure. And plus, with some of the head scratching O line picks, I'm not ready to say, yeah, that was absolutely the right call, but I'm not writing
Yeah,
him off as a bad player.
yeah, and that I'm not saying he's the right pick because if it was me personally, Voorhees was still on the board, the guard out
Mhm.
of USC, and the Ravens actually traded up and took Voorhees a couple picks later, and that was the direction I definitely would have rather gone in. But I get why this regime puts so much into character and so much into the mental makeup of a player, and all of these guys have great mental makeup. Specifically, is Gwen? Am I saying his name right? Gwen.
Yeah, I believe it's Jonvaughn Gwynn.
So I just think that I see what they see in him. I just think it's unfortunate that he may be very limited due to his physical traits. So
100%.
that being said, I kind of saw him as even after I did some self scouting and scouted him afterwards. And in my opinion, he was maybe, more definitely a free agent, a priority free agent. That being said, like I say with all of these guys, I don't get to meet with him. I don't get to look at the medicals with some of these guys. So it sounds like he's really impressed this coaching staff. I mean, there's a reason why they drafted him, and that's
Mhm.
what it is. It's his mental makeup and his willingness to win, and he's going to, if nothing else, he's going to push some of our other offensive linemen into giving it their all because what's the saying? Talent or hard work beats talent when talent's not working hard.
Yeah, 100%. Um, while I'm not 100% sold on the pick, I'm not going to write it off because of some of the great things this regime has done.
Hmm.
And I personally would say, hey, let's give him a chance, see what happens, and hopefully it's good. But with that, do you want to move on to talking about Justin Marshall a little bit, who was kind of a
So
highway robbery pickup in undrafted free agency?
yeah, so why
Runs
don't
a
you
4.4.
you want
He's 6'3", 210 out of where is he
Buffalo?
out of?
UB University of Buffalo.
Oh, that's right. Some great players coming out of there. You had a Jarrett Patterson, I believe. So there's been some good players who have come out of there recently. So it's exciting to see if he'll be the next one. Me and you, we talked about it at the beginning of the show that he's our projected number 5 receiver as of now.
Yeah, I think he'll come in, be the number 5 receiver, and very much could see him pushing to go all the way up to possibly the number 2 receiver by the time it's over. Will that happen? Probably not. But the traits are there. You know, 4.41 speed, 6'3", 210 pounds. He actually tracks the ball really well and has pretty good hands. And most of the things that are his downfalls are like his route running is not great. He just needs a lot of tuning. He needs some tune-ups. He needs to go and he needs to go and just show he can do it. He was never in college. He was never really a vertical threat. But with 4.41 speed, you can be a 4.41 with 4.41 speed. You can be a downfield threat. But he never showed it.
100%.
It's there.
Um, yeah, I totally agree. I think he was one of the best receivers left on the board when
Hmm.
the draft ended. In the Falcons, we wanted a wide receiver at 224 or 225. I was big on getting Bryce Ford Wheaton. I was big on a couple guys with no hands, um, but all athletic traits with
Hmm.
Matt Landers, Bryce Ford Wheaton. But they went elsewhere. Matt Landers to Seattle, Wheaton to Giants. But I think those were like the top 3 available, with this guy being
Hmm.
the guy who can actually catch and has some speed. So I
And
think Falcons made a great decision here.
I think so too. I'll say this though. So the reason why he went undrafted, because I would have totally fine with us drafting him in the seventh. But the reason why he went undrafted is because he's never really had a lot of college production, and he has played zero special teams. I'm not saying he can't because he has the athletic ability too, but he hasn't played special teams. And being we talked about he's going to come in as a wide receiver 5. If you want to make a roster and be a wide receiver 5, you have to play special teams.
100%. I do want to harp on that. He hasn't had any production in college. He did have a little bit last year. He had 800 yards receiving, so I do want to mention that.
Hmm.
But that's not very good if you're playing at a school like Buffalo. Those aren't eye-popping numbers to get you noticed.
And yeah, it was also too. It was 830 yards,
It was
nine.
826, I think, something
So
like that.
800, 826 yards, 800 something yards, 9 touchdowns against not great schools, Toledo,
Mhm.
UMass,
But
um, and the lack of special teams will kind of do it. And he never really did anything before that. He, I think he was a transfer. Trying to remember where he transferred from.
And I want
Louis.
to mention one of the guys who was there before, a running back, ran all over the schools that they played when they were at Buffalo, and that was Jared Patterson.
Mm.
And I believe he also went undrafted before going to the Commanders, and now I believe he's on the Bills. But he's been a solid player in the NFL, great, good RB3 for a lot of teams.
Yeah. So the talent is there. He hasn't shown it. Um, he was on Louisville before that. And, the year before he had 300 yards and 1 touchdown. So it took him, his breakout year, which is kind of usually is an indication for wide receivers, the earlier the better, then the more success they'll have in the NFL, it's shown. So it took him to be a redshirt senior on you know, with a weaker schedule to put up 800 yards and 9 touchdowns. So
Which
that's what it
kind of
is.
points to maybe the drop in competition being a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Which
we'll
it
just
makes
have to see.
Yeah, it could be the talent. One thing you can't take away from him is the talent is there.
100%.
Now,
That's unnegotiable. That the
yeah.
talent is most definitely there.
Now
Um,
it's can he put it together?
yeah, 1,000%.
And and that's why I say like we see like when we talk about these guys and we kind of talk about their ceilings, right? We talk about what they could do. It doesn't mean that's what we think they're going to do or that's what they're going to do. I think he'll be the wide receiver five, probably be the wide receiver five this entire season, unless we bring somebody else in, which we could, and he could end up on the practice squad or end up off the team. Um,
yeah,
or he could come in, start as a wide receiver five and start putting it together, learn how to run routes, learn the offense, knowing he's going to be in and he's not going to be the number one receiver. He'll never be the number one target. At max, he'll be the number four target because that's what our number two receiver is. But he could come in and work his way up with that speed and with that size. He could work his way to be the number two guy behind Drake London in the wide receiver room.
which would be crazy for an undrafted free agents, but it's happened before with some guys. It's
30.
unexpected guys have great performances, and you look at I believe during the draft they put a stat out that 64% of guys come from the fourth round or later or make up NFL rosters. So
And it's 30% are undrafted free agents. It's like 30.7% are
which
UDFAs.
it makes sense because they're filling out the back end of rosters, and obviously some of them have to develop. Undrafted free agents tend to do better than Mr. Irrelevant, with the greatest Mr. Irrelevant so far being Brock Purdy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And it's, quick shout out to Dejuan Johnson, who's a Falcons drip follower, becoming Mystery Irrelevant this year. So I thought that was really awesome. I was hoping he would end up in Atlanta, but I'm really pumped for him to become Mr. Irrelevant because that's the best pick in the seventh round.
Was he Tulane D line?
Yeah.
Tulane? Okay. I thought I saw Tulane when he got drafted, but I wasn't remembering correctly. With that, I think that's going to do it. You got anything else, or you think we're good?
No, I think that's it. I think I know we talked about some of these UDFAs coming in, and I think that we will dive more into those guys maybe next episode and just talk about right now we only have five and we only have six. Right now we only have six roster spots available. And we had six roster spots available. Now we've brought in five UDFAs and we have one roster spot available. So expect one more signing from an undrafted free agent or expect there to be some cuts from some of these other guys to bring more UDFAs on.
Mm-hmm.
But
Expect
if we don't,
guys like Jamal Peters, some of the back end guys,
yeah,
some of the guys who have been there for a couple years. Felipe Franks is on that bubble to where you could be like, okay, this experiment is over.
mm-hmm.
But as of right now, I think that experiment is still going.
Yeah, I think
Um,
we'll have to find a third quarterback that impresses enough for them to say, okay, like because Felipe coming in being a tight end five, a quarterback three, and a special teams guy. I know a lot of people give him a lot of flack, but that's attractive to a coaching staff because of the versatility you have with somebody like that. Most of the times, your quarterback three is not playing on special teams.
100%. And I really like how versatile he is. But I do want to mention we've talked about doing our next episode a week after this episode airs, just so we have some time to look at the undrafted free agents and give y'all a better idea. I've started to
And two even.
watch some of the UDFAs like Carlos Washington Jr., the running back, but as I watch more, we'll put out an episode in like a week
Yeah,
after this
yeah.
episode airs
And
to
two,
give y'all an idea of what UDFAs can make the roster and who
also
you
two,
should look out for.
also too, we've been on the grind, right? So maybe it'll be nice for us to get a little recharge.
Hmm.
So we'll see. Maybe next week you guys will get one. It might not be for 2 weeks. We'll just kind of see how things are going. I think Kyle has some finals coming up too. So
Yeah, I'm finishing up some stuff this week. So I should be good for the next week. I
yeah.
believe got a final on the 2nd and then one on the 5th.
All right.
So finishing that up. And it's gonna be great. I believe we've posted 3 episodes in 4 days now. So it's been our most active streak ever. So
Yeah,
really
it was fun.
loving
Yeah,
putting out
I
the best
wanna
content for y'all.
and I want to thank you guys too because it's honestly like this is so much fun going and getting to talk with Kyle. You guys joining us on the Twitter Spaces and on talking on Instagram, and also too just this is a blast for us. Like we love looking at these guys. We love talking about the Falcons, and we love the support that you guys give us and coming and listening to us. And we just thank you guys for all of your support. And with that, we'll let you guys go, and we'll talk to you shortly. Rise up.
Again, this is Thon Ray. You guys can follow us at Falcons_drip on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Please make sure you subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do to get the alert for our next episode. If you guys enjoyed today, please leave us a review. It always helps us grow. Until then, see you next time. Rise up.